Anyway, so the floor is yours.
Okay.
Tell me how I can help. I can run the
Thank you.
files for you.
Well, we're probably going to want to turn off the lights here in a second, but anyway, thank you very much for including us as one of the 4 finalists that you're considering. I think everyone, well, some of you I know have been exposed to St. John's, Randy in particular, but we've been around for 28 years. For much of our existence, we were a homeless shelter, or basically an emergency shelter for mothers and children. Started on the steps of St. John's Lutheran Church downtown on Allen 17. 3 years later, moved over to Loaves and Fishes, became our own independent nonprofit. And then 2004, moved over to our current facility, which is on Powering Road, and expanded, became a shelter of 100 mothers and children. But for that entire existence, what we really were was what we call a Band-Aid. We took moms who needed, and their families who needed shelter in, and gave them shelter, gave them food, gave them clothing. But when several of us came in 2007, we said, we really want to do more than that. We want to rehabilitate these families and help them become self-sustaining. So we, over the last 7 years, have had quite a journey in doing that. Let me stop and introduce my team members. I think everyone's met Marva Moore, who is actually an employee of St. John's now, but she started with us back in 2009 as a client. And so she's going to talk a little bit, and Libby Moraine, who helped put together this proposal for you. So you'll hear from them a little bit later too. But in 2007, we started the journey of really, building out our program. And so now back then we were a 60-day emergency shelter, and now we are what we call an 18-month continuum that takes homeless mothers and children from crisis to self-sustainability. So we start that at the shelter, and I'm really excited to announce that next year in February, we actually got a grant from the state and have purchased, and we'll be moving into a 28,000 square foot shelter. Our current shelter is 11,000 square feet, and it was designed for us when we were an emergency shelter. And we do a lot more education, a lot more with kids now, and the current shelter just hasn't been adequate for the last 7 years. So the shelter is where they start. They're able to stay with us for 4 months. At the shelter, we have mental health counseling, drug and alcohol counseling, nutrition, finance, life skills, parenting. It's a big part of our curriculum. And really, we get them set up and stabilized to begin employment training, because you really cannot become self-sustaining in this climate without a job. And so pretty soon after they get in and get stabilized, within 30 to 60 days, we move them into employment training at one of our 2 restaurants now, Plates and Plates to Go. Plates to Go just opened downtown this year on Allen 17. And actually, interestingly enough, how we all know that life comes full circle, St. John's Lutheran Church, who founded us, donated the space in which we now operate Plates to Go. They bought the building, but they didn't really need the space. And so it's really nice to be kind of next to home, if you will. So they move into employment training at either the restaurant or at our child development center called First Steps, where they gain skills and build work ethic, and then we place them in employment. I'm really happy to say that 94, I think it's actually 95% now of the mothers who complete our employment training program actually get placed in employment. So we have a very, very high rate of success once they're in that part of our program. Unfortunately, not all of them make it to that part of the program. But because employment training for us is 6 to 12 months, and because the shelter we're limited to having them for 4 months, we actually have a housing program as well. So when we move into the new shelter, we've got 26 units of housing right now, but we'll be expanding that by 18 units because we're converting the old shelter, which is the one we're currently in, into 18 units of additional housing units. So we're really excited about next year. It's a really big year for us. I thought, and so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of St. John, but what we really do is best told by the mothers. So I'm going to transition to a little video we brought in. Can I flip the lights
Sure.
over there? I can. But
everywhere in this room
Okay.
though, so. You might wanna kill those as well, since we still have lights out. So it's just all the.
All those.
You can dim it, works too. Oh, great, no sound. That was a mistake.
We can replace.
That was, the easiest way, quickest way to do this. I apologize,
That's okay.
the sound has to go through, the speakers, and I don't think we have speakers in here. Quickest way for me to do this would probably be just to play my laptop.
Sure.
Is that possible?
Yeah, that's
It's
fine.
a fairly big laptop,
Okay.
and again, I apologize because the,
Matt, could you repeat everything they say too? In case we don't hear it?
yeah, but I can get.
Those speakers up there aren't connected?
They are not, those are connected to, the, phone system.
Well, let's just take a phone.
So you could call in.
Just say they'll be able to.
I mean, I can double check, but.
Yeah.
When you do for the hearing impaired,
Oh, yeah.
all it is yell over
Oh,
Yeah, they put him in.
This is the one thing I didn't check too.
So, you know, it was, I think it was Chevy Chase too.
yeah.
Yeah.
How the news?
No.
And now the news for the hard of hearing. That was a class.
Okay, sorry.
That's
I
okay.
could probably almost like play it from my laptop and then run it up there all at the same time. And that actually might work. If I hit, you know, if I hit start at the same time, then I'm sorry.
So by default, we should win.
Well, your video, we'll see. I'm gonna be there in 2 seconds.
Or an average day for someone who's lost.
Let me get back to the beginning here.
Feel free to put that closer to the.
This will play, the volume should be very loud. This actually plays pretty loud. So I'm gonna try to hit both at the same time.
Or an average day for someone who's lost and doesn't have much. You're left with very few choices. Either to rob, to steal, to prostitute. I don't steal, so therefore I won't rob you. Prostitution was high on the list. Just to survive in a day of drugs. Am I proud of it? No. But is it what I did? Yes. My feelings walking into the doors of St. John's were sad. It was kind of hard to accept the fact that my life had gotten to the point where I couldn't provide a roof over my kid's head. I didn't have the money for a motel. We were surrounded by a bunch of strangers because that's what they were at the time. chicken. We were taught portion control and how to restock the refrigerators and the shelves and how you rotate everything, how to sanitize, how to clean, how to keep things in order, how to stay busy even when you weren't busy or you didn't have much to do, you know, how to look at the bright side of everything. I think the hardest part for me in the transition from the back of the house to like the front line was I was literally put up there. Chef was like, okay, you're going to the salad station, you know, and he just kind of put me up there and he was like, here's the menu, here's what goes in it. When they need you, they need you. And he always said, we have a restaurant to run, we have a restaurant to run. So I got up there, but it took me a minute to get used to the salads. You know, you may know the items that go in the salads because you work in the back, but it's different when you have to put it all together and put it on the plate, and then you're like in the view of the public and everyone's watching you while you're making these salads, you know. So now it goes from being cozy in the back of the house behind the wall to being on the front line, not only having to do what you have to do well, but having to smile while you're doing it. This is my reminder when I walk through the door. We always say we were serving up inspiration. Yeah, we were. There is one thing that's for certain. We have made some lifelong friendships from working at plates. That is definitely a plus. You know. A lot of the girls kind of look up to me. I don't think I really intended for that to happen, but it's nice. You know.
Matt, you must have been a Marine.
Yeah, the precision timing, right?
No, it's adapted,
Very good.
improvised.
Yeah, so I wanted to add that Patience actually now works for AT&T.
Oh,
So
okay.
it has for about the last year. So yeah, she left the cafe for full-time and work with benefits and everything else. So we're really proud of her. But I thought I'm going to transition to Marva, who worked with Patience and who I mentioned now works for St. John's. I do want to add one thing on that note is that about 22% of the employees at St. John's now are former clients, graduates of our employment training program. So we're really proud of that, and I think that really makes a statement about how well we believe we prepare them for the workplace and that they want to come back and see us. But Marva's one of those, and she's one of the 4 moms running Plates to Go now. So Plates, everyone is in training, but Plates to Go is run by 4 mothers. Marva's going to talk about that, a little bit about her story, and then I'll close out with the request. So.
My name is Marva Moore. I came to St. John's in July 2009. I graduated January 2010, and I went from St. John's. I was there 6 months. And when I went to St. John's, I was glad to be there. I was coming from a 20-year drug addiction. And I had one son, but my sister came and took him to Pinole until I got back to St. John's. I stayed at St. John's for 6 months. I went to Makerfield for 10 months. I left Makerfield and went to Saybrook Transitional Housing for 15 months. Then I got a Section 8 voucher and I moved to Natomas where I live today. And the voucher, when you get employed, the voucher, like when I first moved, my rent was like 102. And then Miss Kathleen that works for St. John's, she's an employee training specialist, and she sent me over to Moose, and I worked for the Moose for 3 seasons with the Sacramento Kings. I'm working with the Kings this year. So I work at Place to Go during the day full time, and then I go to work with the Kings in the evening. I'm in Natomas, and in April of this year, I got a letter from housing saying I was no longer qualified for Section 8 because I was employed and I didn't meet the guidelines. You have to make little, low money, or that's the way you qualify for Section 8. But because I'm employed by St. John's and my income is high, I no longer qualify for Section 8. I don't qualify for no housing, no food stamps or nothing, so I'm self-sufficient, living life on life's terms. I have a 11th grader, 16-year-old son who plays basketball for Natomas High. I have a 29-year-old daughter who's graduated from UCLA with a master's degree in education. And I have a 22-year-old daughter who had a baby a year ago, and when she's back in school, she has a BA in after-school work with children, and she teaches marching dance. But I work at Place to Go during the day, and it's really enjoyable. And I couldn't have never done it without St. John's. And I wasn't like Patience when she came in. I was glad to be there because I was tired. I was tired of using drugs. I was tired of getting beat up because you just can't win. So St. John's gave me the tools to get back to life stream because I didn't have no structure in my life. And I don't remember, but the AOD counselor said she prayed that I stayed there, but I don't remember all the bad times I had in St. John's. I just remember the good times. But
Thank God.
they remember. They remember, but I did my AOD counseling. I did
You want to
parenting.
explain what that is? 'Cause none of
Oh, alcohol and drugs. They have a lady there, Joe Green, and you meet with her once a week, and they do random drug tests to make sure you're not using drugs. And I never tested dirty because I was just tired, and I was just ready to start my life over. And St. John's gave me that opportunity. And then I've always wanted to work back at St. John's. And they said, no, you got to be gone for a year. You got to, go out there. So they, I went and I left, but I came back because I really wanted to work for St. John's because they really help people. I went to work at Place in July 2000 or August 2011, and I graduated with Place. I finished the program in 5 months, and I was determined, and it made me feel so good to know, even though it was a volunteer learning, to know I had to do something every day at a certain time, and it helped me to get back in the workforce. It helped me to get a schedule and to be accountable because if you're on a schedule, even though you didn't get paid, you got paid, not monetarily, but it helped build you up and make you want to go to work. So St. John's has really helped me get my life back on track, and I am so grateful to be a part of St. John's.
Yeah, so what Marva was explaining, so there's kind of 2 phases, and the first phase is employment training, and that's what she was in July. And so mothers are in employment training for up to 6 to 12 months. And then and they are what we call volunteer learners. So we provide childcare, we provide transportation, we provide obviously meals when they're there, but we do not pay them. They're working to build work ethic and then to gain employment. So Marva gained employment with the Maloofs, and then and just gave her 2 weeks notice because she was telling me in the car on the way here she only has 2 more years with her son before he graduates, and she wants to be involved in the basketball team and be a team mom and all those fun things, which when you're an addict, it's really hard to even be a parent, let alone be a parent who's present for your kids. So it's kudos to you. I mean, she's done all the hard work. So anyway, the request that you have in front of you, I guess it's a 2-part request. One is to help support the employment training and the job coaching for the moms who go through our program. It's about 40 moms a year. It part of why we were able to do this. But being downtown and not having any place that people can sit outside and not really taking advantage of Sacramento weather, which we don't have right now, but in 2 months, hopefully, we'll be back to having seating outside weather. So we really want to build out that patio, and we really think that's a great project. It's, creative. I mean, we have a limited space, but we can do whatever we want with that space. It's a space that will give visibility to, the effort that you have within the chamber, the Inspire effort, because we can put a plaque, we can do lots of different things. But, it also will be downtown, where you have a good concentration, I know, of members. So the request is really to support our employment training overall, to support what we do with the women in terms of training them and getting them placed, and to help us really grow our business and become a real presence downtown for a place to go. Any questions or comments? Did I hit everything, Libby? Okay.
A question just regarding the job training. Is the job training specifically just in the restaurant industry, or do you have other programs that you guys reach out to?
Yeah, sorry, we have one other program. It's a child development center where mothers are in training to become licensed daycare providers. So that is another vehicle. But I will say, what we say to all the women when they come in, this is not about getting a job in the restaurant industry. It's about getting work ethic and getting skills and getting, a reference, a current reference, because most of our women, if they've worked, less than 50% have ever worked. But if they have worked, it's very sporadic and they don't have any references in any current work experience. So it's really about getting, building work ethic, getting experience and references. We've placed moms in, medical billing. One went into truck driving. One went into, kind of a construction company on the admin side. So it's, we will place them where they really want. We have one of our greatest graduates right now, Rebecca Martinez, who's a finalist for an admin position at a church. So it's really not about gaining, employment in the restaurant industry, though a large number of our women do.
And then just to elaborate a little bit more on the grant at 10 grand or whatever the number ends up being, specifically, how would you look to use that money? Because it says for the employment training program, but I'm not quite sure where the money would actually go to be used.
It would go to the actual training of our women, but also the coaching. So when they get close to finishing their hours, we have a one-on-one person and actually some other people who work with them on resume building, interviewing skills, who help give them job leads and walk them through that process. I mean, our job coach that's working with Rebecca right now is super involved with the church and, just back and forth, getting her the opening. A lot of our women, and I'm glad you asked this question because I wouldn't have thought to bring it up, but a lot of our women have backgrounds. And so our job placement is, we can't send them to, the online service that most people use right now because they get knocked out. I mean, they have, background issues that they just can't, get cleared. So we have to develop a one-on-one relationship with an employer who, over time gains trust with us and wants to really be an employment partner and will, allow people to not have to run through the system, which will get them knocked out most often. So it's a more laborious process than saying, okay, Marva, you graduated, go to Craigslist and, find a job. It doesn't work that
So
way.
it sounds like it's paying for professionals to assist in this placement.
Yes.
Okay, and training. Okay.
Could you use chamber volunteers to help augment that as well?
We can always
Would
use
that
that,
work?
and absolutely. And one of the other things that we're really thinking about doing in 2014 that we'd love chamber assistance with is a mentorship program, almost like in AA or NA, you have to get a sponsor. And what happens is when our women graduate, they're ready kind of mentorship program that we'd love to get the chamber involved into.
What's your timeline as far as the expansion of the patio, and how do you see a Sac Metro Chamber in-kind aid and help?
So we have approval from the city. We have an architect, Laura McCauley, who has done all the design work. We have so many volunteers for both Plates to Go, but Laura's done all the design work and gotten all the approvals from the city, along with Sean Eldridge. So anyway, it's designed and it's approved by the city. So we're ready to go when you are. So, as soon as possible, but again, this is not weather that's conducive to people sitting outside. So we'd actually like to use this time to, build it, design it, and get it done. But, ASAP, I guess is.
So you'd be looking really for construction, any of the trades in construction, as well as just general cleanup, painting, you name it?
Yes, and we have people that helped us do plates, so we can fill in, but we really love a group who just says, we wanna, take this and design it. I mean, we've got ideas. There's like two kind of, I will call them dead spaces that we're just gonna kind of lop off and make that patio area much wider and much more, much better to use. But like the landscaping, do we want to do, pods? Do we want to do a little bit of grassy area in the back? I mean, all of that stuff we haven't really thought through. So we can bring volunteers, to the table, or if the group said, we just want to take this and run with it, we'd be like, hallelujah, go.
In a follow-up, if that's okay, are you looking for materials and labor, just labor and ideas? I mean, both?
Both.
So you are looking for materials and labor?
Yeah,
Okay.
but again, we can augment with what, isn't available. We've got a lot of people who are involved in Plates to Go who would still be willing to be involved.
And then I did have another question for you about, so the population that uses your facilities, where do most of the referrals come to you from?
So,
How do people find you? I'm just curious about
yes,
that.
so we're off the beaten path
Right.
now, so we don't have people showing up on our doorstep. But I will say we're full and we're turning away between 200 and 250 women and children a day right now. And that's been for the last, I should mention, I don't know.
You're turning away 200 to 250 a day?
Yes, a day. So we're the largest shelter in Sacramento County, and we're the only ones focused on homeless mothers and children. And so, we have more than doubled our capacity by adding housing in the last several years, but we have a lot more room to go. And this new shelter hopefully will allow us to, increase capacity eventually. It's a matter of raising more operating funding though.
And you don't have any restrictions on if somebody comes from a different county, or it's a regional facility?
We absolutely do not. And so to answer your question more specifically, we've been around for 28 years, so it's a lot of word of mouth. I mean, we have, cousins and, of other people who have come through the program, friends. I mean, I can't tell you how many calls. In the last month, I've probably gotten 2 or 3 calls from alums who met someone on light rail and said, you've got to go to St. John's, and they'll call me, and, we'll get them on the list. And, so a lot of our alums are, sources of referrals, but we also have people being dropped off by the police. The county is a big source of referrals, but we do not have any restrictions on where they come from. We've had people as far away as Florida, Missouri. It's not often, but it happens.
Michelle, you shared with me once that as a job placement entity, your success ratio is,
94%.
it was an amazing number.
Yeah.
I mean, it surpasses most other job placement efforts.
Yeah, we're really proud of it. It's, we have 6 to 12 months with these moms, and we really feel like we get to know them, and the employment partners that we've developed, they are partners. They don't just take one. They usually take more than one. So, and they know what they're getting. And so we're really proud of that. I will say, St. John's is a very tough program.
St. John's plates, or?
St. John's is the umbrella entity
Right.
under which Plates to Go, First Steps, and our housing program fall.
So the patio that you're talking about,
Mhm.
people that go to that patio and have coffee or have eat or whatever, those, those funds that are, is that generated for people that are from the street? In other words, we go there and we have dinner and it benefits plates, or that's,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just not.
No, yeah, no, absolutely. So, the idea of Plates and Plates to Go, first and foremost, is to get women, give them the job skills, work ethic, and get employed. Secondarily, we hope that we can have surplus revenue. We can't call it profit, and it is a nonprofit, but surplus revenue that actually fuels the overall bottom line of St. John's. Because we as an organization, 7 years ago, we were 80% reliant on government funding. Our budget then was about 1.1 million. We're now at $3.7 million budget. We're less than 30% reliant on government funding. And the whole thing is, we're moving our women in this direction, and we need to be moving in this direction ourselves. And so last year, Plates contributed $45,000 to the overall bottom line of St. John's.
Okay.
And that's a secondary goal.
Just real quick, can you repeat, so do you own the Plates to Go site that the Lutheran Church
The
donated to
Lutheran
you?
Church owns it.
Oh,
and
so
then
they still own it, you have an
Yeah.
operating,
we have a $0
Yeah.
a month lease.
so if any physical improvements to that site, does the church have to approve that?
They are so excited about us getting this patio done. But they will approve it. I mean, I'm not at all worried about it. This is a big
It
priority.
kind of goes back to your question, just on timing and efficiency.
I'm sorry, I just didn't get the idea, is that the patio is for the public?
It
Come
is,
in,
yes.
And so we can go there and have dinner,
Absolutely.
and that's a way that people can fuel this entity as well.
Yes. Now, we aren't open for dinner yet.
No, I'm
Only
saying,
open
no,
for
but
lunch, but yes,
I'm trying to look
yeah.
down the road
Yeah.
for the vision, what's the
Absolutely.
patio about? The patio is to bring, in other words, it's not just a patio where people go and eat, it's a patio where people that are customers go and eat,
Absolutely.
and that generates more
I
revenue.
just
Sorry,
sent
yeah.
the Tiger Retirement Group, I just sent them there for a event where we got catered. Two
Okay.
Plates to Go, and then the plates, the leadership class historically has gone there for one of our days for lunch and
Thank
seeing the operation and work and so on.
We should probably call questions.
Yes.
Can we have that last one?
Yes.
Okay, quick.
So the job success rate is very impressive. How long are they, once they seek employment, have they been able to stay in those positions? And do you have like a support group for them? I've used your facilities numerous times,
Yeah.
and you guys are awesome.
Thank you.
And so there's quite a community, that those women blend with, and then to be out on their own and separated kind of from that community. So is there some follow-up support that once they go out on their own to kind of help them along?
Yeah, so most of the women, almost all of them, and in fact, I think it's about 100%, but anyway, I'll say almost all, move from the shelter while they're in employment training into housing that's all in community. And that housing is technically permanent, so they can stay there as long as they'd like. Our subsidy of their housing is not permanent, however. So when they get employed, kind of similar to what Marva described with her Section 8 voucher, we slowly but surely start to decrease our subsidy of their rent and increase their participation in their rent. But they're allowed to